So key documentations, there's 4 documents that you want to be aware of. The Code of Practice and the Code of Residence Rights, these are standard documents that are standard across all retirement villages, and they sit under the Retirement Villages Act. We then have the Occupation Right Agreement and the Disclosure Statement, which are documents that all retirement villages must have, but they are specific to each village. So all of these 4 documents, the easiest way to get a copy of them is to simply ask the sales or the village manager. The Code of Practice, so like I said, it sets out a minimum set of requirements that all retirement villages must comply with. So these are just a few examples. So staffing requirements of retirement villages, the termination of an occupation right agreement, under what circumstances both a resident or an operator could terminate a contract, the transfer of residents between homes, so for example between independent living up into a serviced apartment, maintenance and upgrading, safety and personal security of residents, fire protection and emergency management, and the complaints facility. You can also get a copy of the Code of Practice just by, the easiest way to do it is simply just to Google it, it will come up, or on Village Guide, my website, you can also go into the Resource Centre and get a link to it that way. Occupation Rights Agreement, so the term Occupation Rights Agreements is simply an umbrella term. So sometimes in the industry, the terminology Occupation Right Agreement and Licence to Occupy is used interchangeably, but it's not exactly the same thing. So there's different types of Occupation Right Agreements upon which you can become a resident within a village. Licence to Occupy is by far the most common here in New Zealand, so I'll focus on a licence to occupy and what that is. But some villages do offer unit titles or rental agreements, but they're far less common here in New Zealand. So a licence to occupy, it does vary from one village to the next, but I can go over kind of what typical characteristics are included in a licence to occupy. So basically it gives you the right to reside in the village for as long as you choose, but no actual legal ownership of the home or the land itself. It gives you the right to use the various communal facilities in the village. It's unlikely that you will receive capital gains when your home is then re-licensed. It's also actually uncommon that you'll be liable for capital loss, but this is something that you'd want to speak directly with to each individual sales manager of villages that you're going to meet with. It's unlikely you can borrow against the value of the home, and under most licence to occupy agreements, the operator will control the re-licensing of the home when you move out. The disclosure statement, so I like to think of the disclosure statement as covering kind of the ins and outs, you know, the day-to-day operations of how each village is run and what you can kind of expect from living there. So it gives you all that general information about who the manager is, who the operator owns each village or that particular village. It should have information about the village's facilities, services. It should have a section about the weekly fee and what's included under the weekly fee. And it should also have information such as who that village's statutory supervisor is. Some other information that you can find in a disclosure statement, so any future plans for development, so whether a village plan to, for example, build an extra apartment block or group of villas, conditions and restrictions for on-selling units, so for example, age criteria, as well as it should have a section that shows you the average time that it's taking to sell homes within the village. So it should have all the homes that were sold in the previous 12 months and how many months it took to sell each of those homes. So it's a really useful document to work your way through. The Code of Residence Rights, this is pretty much as it sounds. It's a summary of residence rights under the Retirement Villages Act. So the right to services and benefits as detailed in your ORA that you have signed, The right to information about matters that could affect your residency. So for example, if the village had a communal facility and they were doing some maintenance on that facility and it wasn't going to be available to you as the residents, that's the type of information that should be communicated. The right to be consulted about potential changes to services, benefits and charges. So some villages, they'll have a fixed weekly fee, others the weekly fee will change over time. If the weekly fee did change over time, that's the type of information that should be communicated. The right to complain and receive a timely response, the right to a speedy and efficient process for resolving disputes, and the right to be treated with courtesy and not to be exploited.